Bodywise Perfect Size is pleased to bring you the courageous Virgie Tovar. Virgie, tell me about some of the changes you've had to make to live the life you do now.
And there are a lot of things that I have had to change. Like one of the first things was I had to learn to manage um, or eradicate the forces in my life that were dedicated to keeping me down, to keeping me, this like sad woman who didn't feel like she could own her own power or worth. And when I say forces, that means people. As I have been making this liberation journey, I've increasingly just stopped being interested in people who think in a very particular way that is very normal, that is very widespread around calorie counting, around essentially like keeping women and keeping ourselves down. And I've sort of decreasingly found that those people are even coming into my life anymore. But at the beginning, I had to deal with the fact that I was dating, for example, men who were kind of body negative. Like, they were maybe telling me that I was sexy and beautiful, but saying things like, maybe you shouldn't wear that. And just kind of learning to recognize that as fat phobia and just own that I deserve better than that. We look for people who affirm our worldview. And some people call this the law of attraction. We attract people who confirm our worldview. And this happens during like it happens during the seduction process, the flirtation process, whatever, like even in a friendship at the courtship phase, it's all happening, all these kinds of incredible little tiny exchanges. Some of them are energetic and some of them are other things. But I found that once I started to let go of these ideas of what it meant to be a woman, and the specific way in which dieting and trying to be as thin as possible was part of that, I found that I had this whole new array of people who were interested in being close to me, whether romantically or some other way, like friendship. I found that, I think about the friendships I have now, they are of a quality that I could never even comprehend. I'm friends with women and people who actually inspire me, who are actually brilliant, who aren't just there to help me police my calorie intake, which unfortunately, and I don't know if this is going to sound overly reductive, but I think a lot of women's relationships, and I think we're taught this way, that like we're almost there to help police each other's consumption. I feel like a lot of women are literally just friends because they're policing each other and spotting each other in that policing process, which is scary. But I remember doing that, and that most of my friendships were that. And now none of them are, and just kind of recognizing how incredible that is. And then I think partner wise, absolutely, just attracting people into my romantic life who saw me and empowered me, and who didn't say don't wear that, who said wear more of that, wear more ridiculous things, like do you, be you. I want to see you being as powerful as you are. And just having partners say things like that, like being introduced to people who were literally telling me, no one owns you. No one gets to tell you what your body looks like. Not me, not anyone. And that just feeling like there's this entire level of humanity that is so incredible, and that I feel like when we're courageous and kind of willing to leave behind these normative ways of being, there's like this whole beautiful existence that I think is kind of purposely obscured by the culture at large, is purposely kind of hidden because it's so amazing that how could you not want it, and why would you live a life that was not like in concert with freedom.
Virgie, how do you deal with some of your family and some of the social
I
forces?
think like when I work with people, a lot of times the hardest forces in their lives to deal with as they're making this transition into body love, like versus just full on body hatred, is like loved ones and learning how to manage loved ones. So, you know, like I always tell people, let's say your parent or somebody in your family is kind of like your biggest enemy or biggest fat phobic force in your life. You know, rather than talking to them 4 times a month, talk to them twice a month. Instead of seeing them, you know, once a month, see them once every 2 months. You just sort of sometimes have to facilitate that process with a little bit of curation. I call it like social curation, if you will. So that's a big one, like learning how to manage and sometimes eradicate the forces. That includes things like canceling your subscription to that magazine that makes you feel like crap every time you read it. That would be another one. I think for me, fashion has been a big part of it, like learning what the dimensions of my body are, getting to alter clothing. I mean, clothing was in a lot of ways ground zero for me as a younger fat girl. Nothing ever fit me when I was a little girl. And it was incredibly, not only frustrating and humiliating, it was also incredibly confusing because I think at that age, I was trying to grapple with my gender as well. And I was incredibly confused about what gender I was because I was clearly not able to fit into girl clothes. And if part of being a girl, a big part of being a girl is your dress, like your, you know, actual dress, not just dresses, but your fashion, then what was I? And so once I started to really change the way that I saw my body, I was able to dress it in this kind of much funner way. And I think increasingly so, I stopped buying clothes that doesn't fit. I stopped buying clothes that is too tight. I stopped buying these aspirational clothing, which I think women are taught to do. That is clothing that is too small for them now, but in the future, when they are inevitably thin, this thing will fit them. That's just like it's a creepy psychological game, right? I think that's terrible. But stop buying those things and then just started altering my own clothing. I mean, it was very healing to kind of like actually cut the clothes and alter it because the clothes were a metaphor for this greater societal thing, you know? And I think cutting into the clothes felt like this like at times kind of radical act of like cutting into the expectations of me as a fat woman. I mean, I started to defend my body when people said things to me on the street, especially. I mean, I've noticed that street harassment is pretty rampant against fat women, against fat people, but I mean, I'm speaking of my own experience, but I started to talk back. And not only in the name of defending myself, but actually in this, like, in my mind, solidarity for other women who these people have attacked and or who could be attacked in the future, and like creating this sense of fear, like instilling a sense of fear in a fat phobe's heart about saying something like that to anyone else in the future, the possibility that that person could talk back and kind of intimidate them with that defense of their body, and the idea that this could stop future incidences of street harassment is very exhilarating to me. There's just been a lot of like just thought shifting that I've had to do, and some of that is seemingly minor, but it takes years to actually internalize it because I'm going against all of this training. So let me give you an example. It's pretty clear when someone attacks you on the street or calls you a name that they are being a bigot. It's pretty clear that somebody who is committing an act of emotional violence against someone who they don't know should be ashamed of themselves. But because we live in a culture in which fat people have been taught to feel ashamed, we feel like we deserve this attack. We're hurt. So that's a normal reaction, but the trained reaction is, and it's my fault. And so I've had to shift my thinking to sort of really understand that you're the bigot. If you're going to introduce fat phobia into our exchange, you are a jerk. You should be ashamed of yourself. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm just walking around the world like any human being is allowed to, and you have decided to bring violence into our exchange. So shame on you. And I sort of think like that has been an incredibly difficult shift. I mean, I'm still in the midst of it. You know, I think that there's like, at this point, I'm probably 65% of the time able to hold that space for myself, but there's 35% of the time at least that I just fail because I'm going up against not only my training from childhood, but this ongoing attack against fat bodies. So I'm like trying to heal in the midst of still being in this violence. And I think that's what people, you know, don't recognize. It's not like something happened to you in the past and now you are safe and you can heal in this safe, contained, you know, environment. That is not the case with fat people. And I think a lot of fat people don't give themselves enough credit. I mean, I think that we beat ourselves up. I mean, if we're trying to love our bodies and accept our bodies, we beat ourselves up if we're not doing it well enough, or succeeding every single day. And I kind of like to remind myself and others just the level of like the onslaught against the spirit of fat people that's being sort of leverage right now. That's the final thing I'm going to say, actually kind of related to what I was just talking about, is just having an incredible amount of compassion for myself, what I'm going through, what I'm feeling. If I have a moment or a day where I'm just like immersed in a feeling of shame or a feeling like I've failed or something, sometimes I have these moments where I'm like, you know, maybe I should just live life differently. Like maybe I'm just too weird. Maybe I'm just doing too much, and maybe I should just try to be more normal. I mean, because I have days like that. And I remind myself that, you know, I was trained to think that way, and it takes incredible courage to fight against every cultural force that we're taught to obey. And I just kind of allow myself a moment to remember that, you know, when I'm having a moment that like that thing will pass, and that it's not my fault that I was taught to hate my body.